Hi everyone, my name is Ana Fabiola Velasco, and I'm both an English teacher and a teacher educator. Throughout the years, I have worked with numerous materials, and in the past few years, I have paid close attention to how women are represented in them. 2 years ago, I decided to modify my syllabus to bring more representation about women, their role throughout history, and their achievements. And I did that because the book that I was supposed to use did not include a lot of information and examples about women. Thus, I selected some grammar points from my syllabus and I did the aforementioned. At the end, my students shared their thoughts on what I did, highlighting the importance of including such topics into the curriculum and their eagerness to have more courses considering such. At the end, their positive responses and comments made me wonder the following. What will happen if I change all my materials to shed light on the role of women throughout history, their experiences, and their challenges? What will the reactions of my students be if I did? And will they be even interested in that? And I knew I wouldn't have the answers unless I tried and challenged myself. And to be honest, I was scared at first because of the uncertainty of how my students would react if I did. But after much thought, I stopped and told myself, let's move forward, let's teach about women, and let's learn together. So, thank you for joining me today to learn more about the importance of gender representation in learning materials and how you can bring a fairer representation of women into the classroom. So, the purpose of this presentation is to foster reflection on how you can bring in more information about women into the curriculum, such as their role in history and their achievements, as well as the stereotypes that they cope with on a daily basis. To achieve that, this presentation aims to provide first a panorama of gender stereotypes and culture in Mexico, followed by the consequences of those. At the end, some practical considerations on how you can teach about women will be provided based on what I did on my English course at university. And I will also share the reactions of my students. So this whole idea of changing my materials, as I mentioned before, started 2 years ago because the book that I had this unit about house chores. But there were not pictures of men doing them, but just one huge picture at the beginning of the unit of a woman vacuuming a carpet, which was clearly portraying and perpetuating a gender stereotype, specifically in the Mexican context. So traditionally, gender roles in our culture in Mexico are well established, and they have caused male and female subordination. And these gender inequalities are visible in education, health, economics, and even political participation. And national statistics can confirm these inequalities too. They prove that women are the ones who do most of the household and familial work, and this is no surprise because in our culture, men are considered to be the providers, the decision makers, and even the protectors of the family, whereas women are considered to be sensible beings, the ones in charge to do the household chores and the ones in charge of keeping the family together. And these ideas have been passed on from generation through generation, and these traditional gender stereotypes can be perpetuated and transmitted in school too, especially through the material, to the educational material and the content that we bring in into the classroom, which can uh, affect not only our students' perspectives, but also their behaviors. Gender inequalities in our country, they are strict and they are perceived as normal within our culture. And these gender inequalities can create psychosocial barriers, especially for women, such as fear or guilt and shame, and which can restrict their access to existing opportunities and their capacity of decision making. And despite the and although they limit especially um, women's freedom, let's not forget that they can define the conducts that are socially acceptable for men. And despite the advancements of gender equality in different areas of our lives, these gender inequalities still prevail. So it's important to empower women so they can see that they can make independent decisions and that they can act as agents of change in their lives and also in their community. And that's what I wanted to do in my course. So I had this massive plan. I wanted to change all my materials to give visibility to the work that women have done in different areas, such as in history, in arts, in the entertainment industry, and even in other countries. I wanted my students to be aware of the experiences that women have to cope with on a daily basis. And I wanted them to reflect and question the gender stereotypes that society has on them. And when possible, I wanted to talk about what happens in our country and about all those women that represent us in different areas. So, right now, I'm going to share with you the contents of my syllabus, the topics that I selected, and even some of the examples that I provided to my students. And I want to do this so you can see that you can teach something more than grammatical structures. So, first of all, I had to teach about comparatives and superlatives and also how gerunds are used as nouns. And I decided to talk about sports and female athletes. Of course, we talk about international athletes, but I also wanted to bring um, athletes from our country, such as Alexa Moreno in gymnastics, Alejandra Valencia in archery, and some female boxers. I also found an article called The Truth About Being a Female Athlete and how they are underestimated in this area and how most of the times they are not paid the exact same amount than men. When I had to teach about indefinite pronouns, I thought immediately about this slogan, impossible is nothing, which comes from Adidas. And we discussed about all the campaigns that they have launched to support women. When I had to teach about modal verbs, I decided to talk about the rise of Marvel women and how they now are portrayed as strong women and not as secondary characters. My students had to learn about expressions to talk about abilities too, adjectives ending in ing, and the differences between possessive adjectives and possessive pronouns. And I decided to keep talking about female superheroes so they can notice that they are strong women and that they can also make a change. My students had to learn about passive voice in the present, and I decided to talk about digital activism and different movements, such as He for She, Like a Girl, Me Too, and Ni Una Menos, which is a Latin America movement to avoid feminicides. We also discussed how the march during March the 8th has been growing and growing each year. I decided to talk also about dress codes so my students could be aware that these dress codes affect mostly women. And I found an article about the issues women face at work, such as sexual harassment, how there's a beauty standard, and how sometimes they are period shamed just because they have strong opinions. And of course, I had to teach about passive voice in the past too. And I decided to talk about the struggle of women's rights in Mexico and the first feminist congress in Yucatan, which was a huge event in history so we could have the right to vote in our country. And I wanted to show my students different inventions made by women so they could be aware that women have invented and discovered a lot of things too. My students needed to learn the difference between subject and object questions as well, and I decided to talk about Latin American women shaking up the tech world and famous Mexican painters. And I wanted to do this so they could be aware of the achievements that these women have done in different areas. And by the time I had to teach Past Perfect, Women, Life, and Freedom was a slogan that was on the international news because women in Iran were protesting. So I decided to talk about the past and the present of women's rights in Iran and the Iranian Revolution because that event changed a lot for them. And I decided to keep talking about history, but now in our country. So I decided to talk about the Mexican Revolution and how the soldaderas and adelitas were important women who made possible that movement. And I did that to teach about past perfect continuous. I also decided to bring different interviews about women in the entertainment industry, specifically Sofia Vergara and Cardi B, because they started from the very bottom and now they are huge stars who have worked so much to achieve that, and how they are very confident and they speak unapologetically themselves. And I did that to teach reported speech. I also had to teach that questions, and I decided to talk about the challenges of being a woman in the 21st century. And I found an article about why the future should be female, and we discussed this um, in my group. At the end of the semester, I had to teach conditionals, and I decided to talk about gender equality and empowering women so my students could be aware of this and the meaning of this. And I found this article about four's most powerful women in Mexico so they can notice that we can be successful too in different areas. And last but not least, I had to teach used to. And I decided to talk about Doña Angela. Doña Angela is a Mexican grandmother who creates cooking videos on YouTube. And I decided to include her in my syllabus so my students could be aware that it doesn't matter how old you are. If you are passionate about it, just they should go for it. All right. So as you could notice, my course was full of women, and we talked and discussed a lot about them at the same time that we were learning and practicing English. So this is possible, and this is something that you can do too. Now, if you are wondering what the reactions of my students were, here are some of them. When I asked them about the importance of women's inclusion in learning materials and if their representation was important, they told me the following. Women are not taken as example unless it is to portray them as the ones in charge of the house chores. Women are not valued as much. They are left aside as there is the stereotype that men do everything. Throughout the years, women's importance has been underestimated, and people consider them as the weak gender. These materials help us to understand that this is not like people believe. When I asked them if their previous courses took into consideration this representation, they expressed the following. Most of our professors stick to the syllabus and they reuse their materials for their courses. Most of the content is about men. This is very common, and it is tiring to review the same topics on men. When I noticed these topics were about women and how they deserve equality, this encouraged me more to come to classes and learn about both history and English. Women are not used as example. Normally, men are used as example of important events. What they include at most is Marie Curie. When I asked them if they liked the material that I brought into the classroom, they said the following: I like them because we learn new things and discover how many things we have now have been invented by women. We also learn about things that happen to women without even noticing. The topics were interesting, mostly because there was a lot of information I did not know before. I like the way in which all this correlated with English. I like them very much because I learned about different women whom I can relate to. I learned about social problems which I had not paid attention before. When I asked them if they would like their subjects to be like the one they had with me, they told me this: we are so used to seeing male presence when we know that women had done more and are not given the acknowledgement they deserve. Little by little, the way of looking at and thinking about women as part of society is changing. This definitely must start at school. I like a lot this idea as it is tiring that women and their achievements are underestimated when they are part of our culture too. When I asked them if they learned something meaningful in my course, these four comments summarize everything. All the course of English 3 was about representing women, covering important topics such as gender equality and current social problems that we're still going through. This was a wonderful course which not only I learned about grammatical structures, but also about feminism. I changed a lot my perspective for the best. Women representation in learning materials is important as we learn about history and how women played a significant role in our lives. We learn interesting facts, for example, about the Adelitas and powerful women such as Doña Angela, and even the injustices women in Iran face. In this course, I realized and learned that women face injustice even way more than men. I learned that women are important and how they have achieved so much throughout history. This is unknown due to ignorance or old perspectives that have not changed. Nowadays, people have started to make a change, and the majority of those people are women. Women are ready to make a change and achieve something significant for society. I learned about the culture of some women around the world and the way they live. I learned that it's not okay for society to normalize attitudes or stereotypes towards women and men. We all deserve to live our lives as we want and as our true selves. So it is evident that my students have been exposed to gender bias materials. And you can also notice how meaningful the materials that I brought into the classroom were for them. So far, we have talked about what happens in our country and how gender stereotypes still prevail for both women and men, and how these gender inequalities can create psychosocial barrier, especially for women, because they limit their freedom. All right. So we need to reflect on the material and contents that we bring into the classroom because we can perpetuate gender stereotypes which can affect of our students in some way. I encourage you to revise and reflect on the materials that you are bringing into the classroom. Challenge yourselves to talk about women and gender equality, and remember that we need to help our female students, especially in our country, to see that they can be agents of change and that they matter too. So, thank you very much for listening to this presentation. I really hope that you challenge yourselves to make a change. Remember, it's time to move forward. It's significant to teach about women because in that way we can learn together. So thank you very much. I truly appreciate it.